Our next guest attended the University of Alberta from 1985 to 1992, earning degrees with distinction in arts and law. He started his own law practice in northeastern Alberta in 1995 and has since grown into a firm of 12 lawyers in Cold Lake, Edmonton, and Calgary. That firm is now known as Grey, Woke, and Spencer LLP, of which Leighton is the senior managing partner and head of its civil litigation section. He has received many awards and distinctions for his work on behalf of the First Nations people, and is a member of the Carry the Kettle Nation from Sintaluta, Saskatchewan. Since 2020, he has acted as lead counsel in several high-profile constitutional cases, including James Coates and Grace Life Church, Timothy Stevens and his church in Calgary, the lockdown challenge involving Dr. Dina Hinshaw, that is been being heard since February, and many vaccine mandate cases involving CN, CP, Alberta Health Services, the University of Winnipeg, University of Alberta, Mount Royal, Salvation Army, and etc. He is a proud Albertan, Canadian, conservative, and tireless advocate for restoration and rehabilitation of the civil liberties guaranteed to all of us by God and the rule of law, and enshrined under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Leighton Grey.
I feel like I've got a magic show here with my lovely assistant. No, we're not going to saw you in half today. You're good. Thank you for that warm welcome. I'm very pleased to be here. As you heard, I am a lawyer, constitutional lawyer. Also, more recently, a podcaster. Some of you might know me from recently a project that we started with my good friend Devin, who's off to my right. He's the star of the show, my producer, called Grey Matter. So I'm going to talk about some things that are maybe more optimistic. So, and I'm going to stay away from law a little bit. I'm going to come back to it. But I want to talk about the vision of APP as I understand it, specifically about this concept of prosperity. But before I do that, I want to just say something, a shout out to my new and good friend, Michael Wagner. Michael was on my podcast. He was gracious enough to appear. Michael, this is a tablet, see? And if this blows out of my hand, we are all in really serious doo-doo. You're getting one of these for Christmas, my friend, okay? But I'll warn you now, you have 11 children, you have to keep them away from it, or you'll never see them again. Okay. Oh, and I should also mention, you heard about the Ingram case I've been working on with my good friend Jeff Rath. Jeff Rath was in Airdrie speaking last weekend, and he got a standing ovation. I've heard about that standing ovation about 40 times since then. And just so you know, some of you may be disappointed that Jeff Rath isn't here. Jeff and I work together, and you know, we harass Dina Hinshaw sometimes. But you know, Jeff, don't expect me to be that funny. Jeff, think of us like you know, Dumb and Dumber, okay? And he would be Jim Carrey. I'm the other guy, okay? So let's talk about prosperity. Let's cue this up. So I talked with Dr. Modry about. Oh, wait a minute! Somebody got married. Congratulations! Dun 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 dun. It's a little bit interesting that a wedding procession goes by when I'm basically talking about constitutional divorce. But, you know, life is like that sometimes. So I'm intrigued by this concept of prosperity. And I talked with Dr. Modry about this, and I discovered that this word was very deliberately chosen, and it's an aspirational word. And I know we talk a lot about the problems that are going on in Canada today, and we need to talk about them because we have to diagnose the problem. But we also have to talk about solutions. We have to talk about cures. We have to talk about a prognosis. Like, what can we do? And one of the great things about the APP, and one of the reasons why it appeals to me, is that it's boots on the ground. It's a constructional movement. We're not just sort of crying in our beer. We're talking about what we can do positively. Michael talked a little bit about that in terms of the referendum and where that can go. If you want to learn more about that, I would encourage you to visit the APP website and also the Facebook page. I found just a wealth of information there. Okay, coming back to prosperity, I'm coming to my point. When you get paid money to talk, it's hard to stay on point. Okay, so this word prosperity. If you've seen my podcast, I like quotations, aphorisms. So I'm going to give you a few about this concept of prosperity. Winston Churchill, who is, if you watch my program, is a favorite of mine. He should be a favorite of yours because he might be one of the most important people of the 20th century. We might not be standing here if it weren't for him. He once said this. He said, "We contend that for a nation to try to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle. I would contend that that man pulling on the handle is an Albertan." Next, in prosperity, this is Marcus Tullius Cicero. In prosperity, let us most carefully avoid pride, disdain, and arrogance. Wow, pride, disdain, and arrogance. Does that sound like anybody we know? Initials JT. I like this next one. Prosperity is not just having things, it is the consciousness that attracts the things. Prosperity is a way of living and thinking, not just having money or things. Okay, and its opposite is poverty. Shakespeare said, prosperity is the very bond of love, including, I would say, love of country, love of province, love of home, love of family, even love of self, the good kind. Shakespeare also said, kill all the lawyers, but we'll forgive that. Here's some synonyms for prosperity, just to give you a sense of how important this word is in the APP. Accomplishment, benefit, boom. Wow, there's Alberta right there. Boom, right? Expansion, growth, riches, success, wealth, welfare, not the kind Trudeau wants. Okay, welfare means a state of being where you're healthy. Well-being, abundance, advantage. Like, remember Ralph Bucks? Those of you who are old enough, the Alberta Advantage. To do something, right? To be fortunate, to give increase, to be fruitful and multiply. So this word prosperity is more than it's more than just a word there. This prosperity has been, I think, very carefully chosen, and it gives a very positive vision. It's very important. In fact, speaking of vision, if you go and you take a look at the Alberta Prosperity Project vision, all this information is there for you to see. It's a 10-point vision. And I would say that this idea of prosperity really unites the full 10-point vision. Because in the 10 points, it talks about things like this. Alberta becomes the most free and prosperous nation in the world to live, work, raise a family, and start a business. That sounds good. First Nations participate as founding partners. That sounds really good to me. No Albertan is left behind. There's no need for political left or right. How good does that sound? Well, who else is sick of hearing about the left and the right? When I was a hockey player before, the only left and right was, which way you shot. Now this is all we talk about in public discourse, left and right. Workers' rights are protected and business is allowed to thrive, okay, without COVID restrictions and horrible taxes and property taxes driving small business owners out of business while big box stores and Amazon flourish. How about social programs are compassionate and effective? Okay. Healthcare and education are of the highest quality. Pensions and old age security for our seniors. Every Albertan and their family enjoy an enhanced quality of life and standard of living. Alberta becomes the lowest tax and highest GDP per capita nation in the world. Imagine that. Alberta would be would be the richest country in the world. Just stop and drink that in for a second. Why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because when we talk about separation, people ask me about, and I told them that I'm getting involved in APP. By the way, I'm a newbie to this. This is only my second meeting. These people were crazy enough to let me get up here and talk. Okay, this is my first time being here, and I'm grateful to be here. But I have to confess, I was a little shy of APP because I was raised in the Peter Lougheed era, where we were Canadians first, we were Albertans second. And part of being a good Albertan was being a good Canadian. And as Michael has so eloquently explained, both here and on my podcast, as another plug, that hasn't worked. And so one of the reasons why I stayed away from the APP, or I was shy of it, is this word separatist. Because I'm old enough to remember separatism as, René Lévesque, the cigarette chomping guy who wouldn't sign the Constitution, right? And separatism, it has a bad connotation. But the APP is different because the separatism is a means to prosperity. It's more than a means, it's a necessity. It's a natural step. It's a growth phase, part of the metamorphosis, okay? It's like, I don't know, Alberta coming out of the cocoon. We could be that butterfly. We could be that richest country in the world, but we can't do it when we're trapped in the cocoon. And that's where we've been for these many years. So, but there's another context around prosperity that I want to talk about, and the reason why the APP speaks to me. Because I'm a conservative, small c conservative. And I read a book, actually several books, by an author that you should check out. His name's Dr. Roger Scruton. I'm sure Michael knows who I'm talking about. And sadly, he died far too soon, about 5 years ago in 2017. He was in his early 70s. But fortunately for us, he left us behind him just a legacy of the most wonderful books. He's also, he spoke a lot publicly. So if you go onto YouTube, you can hear a number of his speeches and interviews. Just a beautifully eloquent, Cambridge-educated lawyer. But more than that, he was schooled, educated in things like architecture. He was even an authority on wines, if you can believe it. Anyway, he wrote a wonderful book called How to Be a Conservative. And we use this word all the time, conservative, and we don't know what it means. And when I read that book, I understood what it means. And then when I connected, and what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try to connect two dots for you about Roger Scruton's concept of conservatism and what that means, and prosperity within the context of APP. So hopefully I won't. If I lose you, it's because I didn't do a good job of explaining this, because I always assume, and Devin's here, our assumption on the podcast, all the people who are listening are intelligent. And they're also there because they want to be engaged in a meaningful conversation. So this is what I'm trying to have with you right now. So what is the connection between prosperity and conservatism? Well, there is one, and it's beauty. Let me explain. So Dr. Roger Scruton defined what a conservative is in the best way that I have found. And this is what he said. What does a conservative do? When you want to know what something is, right, you ask what it does. Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do, right? So if you steal all the time, you're a thief. You lie all the time, you're a prime minister. I mean, you're a liar. But my point is, we are what we repeatedly do, okay? So what does a conservative do? First principles, a conservative conserves. Okay, well, that's a start, but it's not an answer. It's the beginning of an answer. So as a conservative, what do we conserve? Well, Dr. Roger Scruton says we preserve beauty. Okay, so we're getting closer to the answer. Well, what is beauty? Is beauty, we hear that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Well, maybe that's true. I'm not so sure that many people, I could get on board with people saying that the state of Canada today is beautiful. I would say tragically beautiful, maybe beautiful in a macabre sense, where we're in a black comedy. But what is really beautiful and what is worth conserving, this is what Dr. Roger Scruton said, are all the things that we value, that we hold dear, that we would want to preserve, that we would want to fight for, that we would die for, to pass on to our children and their children and their children and their children. Okay, so that's beauty. So think about all the things that would include. That would include, if you're a hockey fan, that would include the Oilers. If you love the opera, that would include The Marriage of Figaro. Okay? All the things that you consider beautiful, the things that you would pass on, the legacy of Alberta, of all of this. This is beautiful. When we talk about the environment, what are we talking about? Conservation, right? We want the trees and the clean water and everything for our kids and for our grandchildren. That's beauty. We want to conserve that. And guess what? That's in the APP plan too. And all of this is part of prosperity. Another old guy that Michael will know about is named Socrates. He talked about beauty in terms of forms, okay? So, for example, this microphone, Socrates would say that this is an approximation of a form, okay? The beautiful microphone, the ideal microphone, which doesn't exist, existed in someone's head, and they created this thing. To the extent that this microphone is beautiful, okay, it approximates the form of the microphone. So how does this relate to what I'm talking about? Well, the APP, the vision, as I see it, is a form, that vision that I just read to you. That's the form of beauty, of a beautiful, sovereign, free, prosperous nation. Okay? That's a form. And right now, it exists as an idea. So the job that we have right now as Albertans is to take that idea, approximate that form, speak and walk and act that vision into reality. And when we do that, we will have a beautiful, free, and prosperous Alberta. Okay? So that's what I see the vision of the APP and what we're trying to do here. So yes, it's about separatism. But it's the kind of separatism that happens when you have a leg that's full of gangrene and it has to come off to save the body. Only guess what? Imagine if that occurred, but you were like some sort of amphibious life form that could grow that leg back, and it would be 10 times as strong as it was before, right? Okay, so this is where I'm going to end off. I've been asked, I'm very honored, Dr. Modry asked me to work on the new constitution for the new Alberta. How great is that? Honestly, what an honor. And within that, I'm going to be constructing a new Bill of Rights. So I'm going to tell you just as a preview what the first two statements in the Bill of Rights are going to be. Number one, we affirm and acknowledge the supremacy of God and the rule of law. That's number one. Number two, no government, legislature, or court shall restrict, infringe, violate, or limit an individually protected freedom set out in this Bill of Rights. Yeah. So we will never again have a situation where Dr. Hinshaw or anybody else is telling us, you don't have rights, you have privileges. We're going to hand these out like Halloween candy. And oh, by the way, well, maybe we'll cancel Halloween this year. No more. The individual is supreme in the new Alberta. And that is the way, that's the only way to a prosperous Alberta and sovereign Alberta that's free. So I encourage all of you to find out more about the APP. And I want to thank you for your attention today. It's been my great pleasure and privilege to be here.